Professor Lee Ji-ho stared at his reflection in the chrome-plated wall of the Galactic Institute's elevator. His new teaching uniform felt stiff and uncomfortable. The material was nothing like the cotton and polyester clothes from Earth. This one changed color based on his body temperature, which the alien staff had assured him would help his students feel more at ease with his presence. More at ease with the dangerous human, they mean, he muttered to himself. The elevator moved sideways suddenly, making his stomach turn. After 2 weeks at the Institute, he still wasn't used to elevators that moved in 6 different directions. A soft chime announced his arrival at the biology department, and Ji-ho stepped out, holding his tablet computer tightly. The halls were filled with beings from across the galaxy. A group of floating crystal creatures drifted past him, their bodies making soft, tinkling sounds. 2 tall aliens with blue fur nodded politely but quickly moved to the other side of the hallway. Ji-ho had gotten used to this reaction. To them, Earth was a death world, and humans were seen as dangerous primitives who had somehow managed to build spaceships. "Professor Lee," a friendly voice called out. Ji-ho turned to see Kim Hae-nul, his teaching assistant, hurrying toward him. Hae-nul was fresh out of Seoul National University, and her excitement about being in space hadn't worn off yet. "I've set up the classroom for your first lecture. The hologram projector is ready for the ocean footage." "Thank you, Hae-nul. How many students today?" 42 enrolled. They're very curious about Earth's marine biology, though some filed complaints about having a human teacher. Hae-nul checked her tablet. "One student asked if you would be wearing a containment suit to prevent, let me check the exact words, accidental release of deadly Earth bacteria." Ji-ho laughed, though it wasn't really funny. He had 3 PhDs and had published more research papers than any other professor in the department. Still, some students thought he was too dangerous to be in the same room with them. They reached the classroom door, which automatically scanned them before sliding open. The lecture hall was built like a bowl, with seats rising up in circles. Most seats were already filled with various alien species. Some looked almost human, while others were so different that Ji-ho couldn't tell which end was their head. "Professor Lee," a musical voice chimed. Dr. Park Sun-mai, another Earth scientist who had been at the Institute for a year, stood near his desk. "Don't let them intimidate you. Show them what Earth has to offer." Ji-ho nodded and walked to the front of the room. He noticed how some students in the front row leaned away from him. A few even activated their personal shield bubbles. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm and clear. "I am Professor Lee Ji-ho from Earth's Seoul National University. Today, we begin our study of Earth's marine biology." He tapped his tablet, and the room darkened. Above everyone's heads, a giant hologram of Earth's oceans appeared. "Before we discuss specific creatures," Ji-ho continued, "let me tell you about the environment they live in. Earth's oceans cover 71% of our planet's surface. The average depth is 3.7 kilometers, but some parts go down to 11 kilometers. A whisper ran through the room. Ji-ho saw several students checking their translation devices, surely thinking there must be a mistake. "At these depths," he went on, "the pressure is enough to crush most spaceships. The temperature ranges from -2 degrees Celsius to over 400 degrees Celsius near hydrothermal vents, and in the deepest parts, there is absolutely no light." The room had gone completely quiet. Ji-ho smiled as he noticed some students already looking uncomfortable. Hae-nul gave him a thumbs up from the back of the room. "And in these extreme conditions," Ji-ho said, his smile growing wider, "life not only exists, it thrives. Today, we'll start with some of the simpler creatures, before moving on to the really interesting ones next week." As he pulled up the first images of deep-sea creatures, Ji-ho heard several students gasp. This was going to be an interesting semester. Kim Hae-nul worked quickly to adjust the hologram settings as Professor Lee Ji-ho began his presentation. The 3-dimensional image of Earth's oceans floated above the students' heads, its blues and greens casting strange shadows on their varied forms. Some students had skin that changed color to match the lighting, making them look like living pieces of the ocean. "Let's start with something simple," Jai-Ho said, tapping his tablet. The hologram changed to show a coral reef. "This is what we call a coral reef ecosystem. It's one of the most diverse." "Excuse me, Professor," interrupted a tall, silvery being whose body looked like flowing mercury. "Are you suggesting that multiple species live together in the same space, without proper containment protocols?" Jai-Ho shared a quick look with Hae-Newell before answering. "Yes, that's correct. Earth's oceans contain millions of species living together in complex food webs." The mercury-like student's surface rippled in what Hae-Newell had learned was a sign of distress. 3 other students activated their environmental shields. "Now watch this," Jai-Ho continued, zooming in on a particular coral formation. "These small fish live inside the coral's tentacles. The coral provides protection, and the fish clean the coral and chase away predators. We call this symbiosis." A crystalline student near the front raised a geometric appendage. "Professor, are you claiming that these creatures developed this arrangement naturally, without genetic engineering?" "That's right," Jai-Ho replied. "Through millions of years of evolution." The crystalline being made a sound like breaking glass, which the translator rendered as a shocked gasp. 2 students in the back row quietly gathered their things and left the room. From her position at the back, Hae-Newell could see Dr. Park Sun-mi trying not to smile. The other Earth scientist had warned them this might happen. Most galactic species had developed in carefully controlled environments, and Earth's chaotic ecosystem was completely foreign to them. Jai-Ho moved on to explain how some fish changed their sex based on environmental needs. This caused another wave of students to activate their shields. One particularly delicate-looking being had to be escorted out by its personal medical drone. "Perhaps we should move on to some hunting behaviors," Jai-Ho suggested, seemingly unaware of the growing tension in the room. Hae-Newell knew better. She could see the slight smile at the corners of his mouth. The hologram shifted to show a school of fish swimming together. "Notice how they move as one unit," Jai-Ho explained. "This confuses predators and—" "Predators," squeaked a fuzzy, purple student. "You mean some of these creatures eat each other, while they're still alive?" "Of course," Jai-Ho said calmly. "In fact, some of Earth's most interesting creatures have developed fascinating hunting methods. For example, the purple student fainted, its fur turning white. Its medical drone quickly sprayed it with a reviving mist." Hae-Newell checked the room's environmental monitors. Several species were showing elevated stress levels, and one group of gaseous beings had condensed into worried-looking clouds near the ceiling. Dr. Park Sun-mi stepped forward. "Professor Lee, perhaps we should give the students a moment to process this information. It's quite different from the controlled evolutionary paths they're familiar with." Jai-Ho nodded, but Hae-Newell could see he was fighting back a grin. "Of course. Take 5 minutes to review your notes. When we return, we'll discuss some of Earth's more unusual creatures, starting with a remarkable fish that creates its own vacuum to capture prey." The room erupted in nervous whispers. Hae-Newell watched as several students began sending urgent messages on their communication devices. One student appeared to be filing a formal complaint, while another was apparently updating its will. "Professor," Hae-Newell said quietly as she approached Jai-Ho's desk, "maybe we should warn them about what's coming next." Jai-Ho shook his head, his eyes twinkling. "Where's the fun in that? Besides, they need to learn that the universe is far more diverse than they imagined. It's for their own good." Hae-Newell couldn't argue with that, but she did send a quiet alert to the medical bay to have extra recovery drones on standby. Something told her they were going to need them. After the brief break, Professor Lee Ji-ho resumed his lecture. The hologram now showed the depths of Earth's oceans, displayed in precise layers. Hae-Newell noticed that fewer students had returned to their seats. Those who remained sat stiffly, their personal shields glowing faintly in the dim light. "Now let us explore the different layers of Earth's oceans," Jai-Ho said, pointing to the hologram. "As we descend, The pressure increases significantly. For every 10 meters we go down, the pressure increases by 1 atmosphere. A student with tentacles raised one of its limbs. Professor, there must be an error in the translation. These numbers suggest that creatures live under pressure that would crush our strongest submarines. The translation is correct, Jai-Ho replied with a pleasant smile. In fact, some creatures live at depths where the pressure is equivalent to having 3 space cruisers balanced on your head. The tentacled student's color changed from green to pale white. 2 more students quietly gathered their belongings and left the room. Dr. Park Sun-mai watched from her position near the door, making notes on her tablet. She had seen this reaction before when she first taught about Earth's volcanic regions. The galactic community had a hard time accepting that life could exist in such extreme conditions. Jai-Ho continued his lecture, moving the hologram to show the darkness of the deep ocean. Below 1,000 meters, no sunlight reaches the water. We call this the midnight zone. Yet even here, life flourishes. But how do they see? Asked a floating orb of light, its glow flickering with anxiety. Many of them don't see at all, Jai-Ho explained. Others have developed their own light sources. He changed the hologram to show a lanternfish. This fish creates its own light through a process called bioluminescence. The light orb student dimmed considerably and sank several inches in the air. Its medical drone hovered closer, ready to intervene if needed. The most fascinating aspect, Jai-Ho continued, is how these creatures have adapted to the extreme cold, darkness, and pressure. Some fish in these depths have transparent blood. Others can absorb light through their bones. Hanul watched as a group of crystalline students near the front began to vibrate in distress. Their translator announced they were experiencing structural integrity concerns just from thinking about such conditions. Professor, called out a student whose body appeared to be made of flowing gas. Are you suggesting that these creatures evolved naturally to survive in these conditions, without technological assistance? Exactly, Jai-Ho confirmed. Earth's oceans have been around for billions of years, giving life plenty of time to adapt to every possible condition. The gaseous student condensed into a tight, worried ball. Its medical drone sprayed it with a calming mist. And here's something even more interesting, Jai-Ho said, changing the hologram again. Some deep-sea creatures can survive both the crushing depths and the relative absence of pressure near the surface. They regularly travel up and down the water column. This statement caused immediate chaos. 3 students immediately requested emergency evacuation from the room. A group of energy beings in the back row dimmed so much they became almost invisible. One crystalline student had to be rapidly defrosted after accidentally freezing itself in shock. Dr. Park Sun-mai stepped forward again. Perhaps we should take another break, Professor Lee. Some students appear to be having difficulty processing this information. Jai-Ho nodded, though his eyes sparkled with amusement. Of course, we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll discuss how some of these creatures hunt their prey. I have some fascinating footage of a gulper eel swallowing a fish larger than itself. Hanul quickly activated the room's emergency ventilation system as several gaseous students began to leak stress pheromones. She noticed that Dr. Park was quietly placing bets with another professor about how many students would remain for the next section. Professor Lee, Hanul whispered as she approached his desk, should we maybe skip the part about the gulper eel? Skip it, Jai-Ho replied, raising an eyebrow. But we haven't even gotten to the good part yet. Wait until they learn about the fish that hunts by creating vacuums. Hanul sighed and sent another message to the medical bay. They were definitely going to need more recovery drones. After the break, Professor Lee Ji-ho noticed that only half of his original class remained. The missing students had sent medical exemptions through their drones. Most cited psychological stress from exposure to extreme biological concepts. He smiled as he prepared his next presentation. Before we discuss our main topic today, Jai-Ho began, I would like to introduce you to a small creature called the snapping shrimp. He changed the hologram to show a tiny shrimp, barely 5 centimeters long. Several students visibly relaxed. The small creature looked harmless enough. One crystalline student even deactivated its shield, its crystal facets catching the light as it leaned forward with interest. This little shrimp, Jiho continued, can create a bubble that reaches temperatures almost as hot as the surface of the sun. The crystalline student's shield snapped back on immediately. Two gaseous students near the ceiling began to swirl in distress. Hanul adjusted the hologram to show a slow-motion video of the snapping shrimp in action. The shrimp closes its claw so quickly that it creates a cavitation bubble. When this bubble collapses, it produces a flash of light and extreme heat. The temperature inside this bubble, Jiho added, can reach 4,700 degrees Celsius. Dr. Park Sunmai watched from the back as a group of energy-based students flickered rapidly in what their translator described as extreme distress at the concept of uncontrolled energy release. "Professor," called out a metallic student, its surface rippling with concern, "are you suggesting that this primitive creature can create temperatures comparable to a star by closing its claw?" "Exactly," Jiho confirmed. "The process also creates a loud snapping sound that can stun or kill its prey. In fact, large groups of these shrimp can interfere with underwater communication equipment." The metallic student began to melt slightly. Its medical drone quickly sprayed it with coolant. "But that's impossible," exclaimed a floating orb of light. "Such capabilities would require advanced technology, precise environmental controls, and nature often finds solutions that technology still struggles to replicate," Jiho interrupted politely. "Earth's creatures have evolved many fascinating abilities that might seem impossible." 5 more students immediately requested to leave, citing environmental stress responses. Their medical drones escorted them out, leaving trails of calming mist behind them. Hanul approached Jiho's desk with a concerned look. "Professor, the medical bay reports they're running low on calming mist. Should we perhaps take another break?" "Oh, we're just getting started," Jiho replied with a smile. "We haven't even reached the interesting part yet." Dr. Park Sunmai stepped forward, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Jiho, maybe we should warn them about what's coming next." "And spoil the surprise." Jiho shook his head. "They need to learn that the universe is full of wonders they haven't imagined yet. Now let me show you the high-speed footage of how this shrimp hunts." The remaining students huddled closer together as the hologram changed to show the snapping shrimp in action. The slow-motion video captured the moment the cavitation bubble formed and collapsed, creating a flash of light and a powerful shockwave. A student made entirely of floating liquid crystallized instantly in shock. Another student, who resembled a sentient cloud, condensed into a small, dense ball of worry. 3 more students quietly filed emergency transfer requests to less biologically challenging courses. "Remember," Jiho said cheerfully, "this is just the warm-up. Wait until you see the fish that creates vacuums." Hamnul quickly sent another message to the medical bay requesting additional recovery drones and a fresh supply of calming mist. She had a feeling they were going to need everything they could get. Professor Lee Jiho paused to survey his classroom. Only 15 students remained from the original 42. The medical drones hovered anxiously around the room, their sensors glowing as they monitored stress levels. In the back, Dr. Park Sunmai was collecting small payments from other professors who had bet that more students would stay. "Now," Jiho said, his voice filled with excitement, "let me introduce you to the northern clingfish." The hologram changed to show a small, unassuming fish with a flat belly. A few students relaxed slightly. After the snapping shrimp, this creature looked harmless. One brave student even lowered its environmental shield. "This remarkable fish," Jiho continued, "can attach itself to any surface, rough or smooth, wet or dry, by creating an instant vacuum seal." He displayed a diagram showing the complex structure of the fish's belly. "Excuse me, Professor," interrupted a floating sphere of plasma, its voice crackling with disbelief. Are you suggesting this creature can generate a vacuum without technological assistance? Precisely, Jai-Ho replied. He pulled up detailed scans of the fish's underside. The rim of its belly is covered in microscopic hairs that can conform to any surface texture. When the fish pulls up the center of its belly, it creates a powerful suction effect. The plasma student flickered rapidly, its translator struggling to keep up with its distressed communications. Two crystalline students began to vibrate at frequencies that made the windows hum. Hanul stepped forward with more data. The fish can stay attached even in crushing waves and strong currents. The suction force can be up to 230 times its body weight. That's more holding power than many of our industrial vacuum systems, gasped a metallic student, its surface rippling with shock. Nature is quite efficient, Jai-Ho agreed. He activated a simulation showing how the fish's suction system worked. The microscopic structures in its belly can attach to surfaces rougher than sandpaper, yet leave no damage when the fish releases its hold. A student made of pure energy began to flicker so violently that its medical drone had to encase it in a stabilizing field. 3 more students requested immediate transfers to less physically improbable courses. The most fascinating part, Jai-Ho continued, seeming not to notice the growing distress, is how the fish uses this ability to catch prey. Dr. Park Sun-Mei moved closer to the door, knowing what was coming next. She had seen Jai-Ho's previous presentations and knew this was where things usually got interesting. You see, Jai-Ho explained, bringing up a new hologram. When the fish spots its prey, it can create an instant vacuum effect that not only secures its own position but also. He paused for effect, watching as the remaining students leaned forward despite their obvious anxiety. Creates a suction force strong enough to pull in prey whole, even in turbulent waters where other predators would struggle to catch anything. The reaction was immediate. 2 gaseous students evaporated on the spot, their medical drones quickly collecting their essence in containment fields. A crystalline student shattered into tiny pieces, though its personal shield quickly gathered them up. The plasma student collapsed into a dense ball of panic. Here's a video demonstration, Jai-Ho said cheerfully, reaching for the hologram controls. Hamnul quickly sent an urgent message to the medical bay. Send all available recovery drones. Yes, all of them. Trust me, we're going to need them. From her position near the door, Dr. Park Sun-Mei began taking bets on how many students would remain conscious for the video presentation. Based on their current stress levels, she suspected she was about to win another round of wagers. Professor Lee Jae-ho started the video presentation with a satisfied smile. The hologram showed a northern clingfish in its natural habitat, moving slowly across a rocky surface. Only 8 students remained in the classroom, their personal shields glowing at maximum power. Watch carefully, Jai-Ho said, his voice calm. You're about to see the fish's hunting technique in action. The hologram zoomed in as the fish spotted its prey, a small creature swimming nearby. In slow motion, the video showed the clingfish's belly creating an instant vacuum seal. The water around it swirled violently, and the prey was suddenly pulled into the fish's mouth hole. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. The remaining students fled in every possible way. 2 gaseous students phased straight through the walls, leaving behind trails of panic-scented mist. A crystalline student vibrated so intensely that it teleported itself out of the room, leaving behind a shower of sparkles. 3 energy-based students transformed into pure light and shot through the ceiling, their medical drones racing after them. The last 2 students, who had bodies made of flowing metal, literally melted through the floor grates, their medical drones spraying coolant in their wake. Hanul stood in the empty classroom, surrounded by abandoned data tablets and personal belongings. Well, she said, trying not to laugh, that went better than expected. At least no one exploded this time. Dr. Park Sun-Mei walked to the front of the room, collecting her winnings from the other professors who had been watching. Impressive, Jai-Ho. You managed to clear the room even faster than when I taught them about Earth's volcanic bacteria. Jai-ho turned off the hologram projector with a satisfied nod. They needed to learn this lesson. The galaxy is full of amazing life forms, not just the carefully engineered species they're used to. A message flashed on the room's communication screen. It was from the Institute's administration office, URGENT. Multiple students reporting severe psychological distress. Emergency counseling sessions being arranged. Please explain why 23 students are demanding immediate transfer to different departments. Another message appeared. Medical bay alert. Shortage of calming mist. Emergency supplies needed. Multiple species requiring stabilization. Several crystalline students need structural reassembly. Hanul checked her tablet and started laughing. Professor, you might want to see this. The students are sharing videos of their escape on the Institute's social network. The one of the gaseous students phasing through the wall is going viral. Look at this, Sun Mai added, showing her own tablet. Some students from other departments are actually requesting to join your next class. They don't believe the stories about the vacuum-creating fish. Jai-ho smiled as he gathered his teaching materials. Good. Maybe he'll be more open-minded about Earth's biology. After all, we haven't even discussed the pistol shrimp yet, or the hagfish with its choking slime, or the water bear that can survive in space. Please don't mention those in your next class, Hanul begged. The medical bay is already overwhelmed, and we're running out of recovery drones. No promises, Jai-ho replied with a grin. Education sometimes requires a little shock and awe. Besides, they should be thankful I didn't start with the bobbit worm. The three humans left the classroom, still chuckling. Behind them, the medical drones were busy collecting abandoned personal items and cleaning up small puddles of liquid metal. In the hallway, they could hear distant sounds of students frantically telling others about the terrifying creatures from Earth. The galaxy was about to learn that humans weren't just surviving on a death world. They were studying and classifying its monsters with scientific enthusiasm. The next morning, Professor Lee Ji-ho sat in the Institute director's office. The director, a tall being made of shifting colors and geometric patterns, floated behind a large desk made of pure energy. Kim Hanul and Dr. Park Sun-mai stood beside Jai-ho, trying to maintain serious expressions. Professor Lee, the director began, its colors swirling with concern. Your lecture yesterday has caused quite a situation. The medical bay reports treating 42 cases of extreme shock, 15 cases of temporary phase shifting, and 3 cases of spontaneous molecular disruption. Jai-ho nodded politely. I understand, Director. However, all students have fully recovered, correct? Yes, but that's not the point. The director's patterns shifted to show agitation. We've received 17 formal complaints about traumatic information delivery and 33 requests for transfer to different departments. Hanul stepped forward with her tablet. Director, if I may, we've also received 48 new enrollment requests for Professor Lee's next class. It seems the video of yesterday's lecture has become quite popular on the Institute's network. The director's colors flickered in surprise. New enrollment requests. After what happened? Yes, Sun Mai added, showing her own data. Students from advanced biology programs across the galaxy are requesting to join. They want to learn more about Earth's marine life. Some are even offering to sign safety waivers. The director's geometric patterns rearranged themselves into what humans had learned was a sign of deep thought. This is unexpected. Professor Lee, your teaching methods are highly unusual, but I cannot deny the results. Students are suddenly showing intense interest in Earth studies. That was my goal, Jai-ho explained. The galaxy needs to understand that life can develop in ways they haven't imagined. Earth's creatures have much to teach us about adaptation and survival. Just then, a message appeared on the office's communication screen. It was from the Galactic Science Council, URGENT, requesting full documentation of Earth's marine biology. Particular interest in vacuum-generating fish and other extreme adaptations. Multiple research institutes requesting collaboration opportunities. The director's colors shifted to a spectrum that indicated resignation. It seems I cannot argue with success. Professor Lee, you may continue your lectures. However, please install additional emergency exits in your classroom. And perhaps we should increase our supply of calming mist. Thank you, Director, Jai-Ho said with a small smile. I'll prepare my next lecture carefully. I think the students would be fascinated by the immortal jellyfish. The director's patterns froze. The immortal jellyfish. Oh yes, Jai-Ho continued cheerfully. A creature that can reverse its own aging process. Quite remarkable, really. Though not as interesting as the fish that walks on land, or the octopus that can edit its own genetic code. The director's colors began to fade slightly. Hae-Newell quickly stepped forward with a personal shield generator, just in case. Professor Lee, the director said weakly, please remember that we have limited medical resources and our insurance policies. Well, perhaps we should discuss this another time. You are dismissed. As they left the office, Hae-Newell checked her tablet again. The video of yesterday's lecture has now been viewed over 1 million times across the galaxy. The comments are quite interesting. Many species don't believe the clingfish is real. They'll learn, Jai-Ho said with a satisfied smile. The universe is full of wonders, and Earth has some of the best examples. Now help me prepare for tomorrow's lecture. I think it's time to tell them about the tardigrade. Sun-Mi laughed. Should I warn the medical bay to stock up on recovery drones? Definitely, Jai-Ho replied. And maybe order some extra structural stabilizers for the crystalline students. They tend to shatter when they learn about creatures that can survive in space. 1 week after the infamous clingfish lecture, Professor Lee Ji-ho sat in his office, reviewing student applications. His desk was covered with data tablets showing hundreds of requests to join his class. Kim Hae-Newell sorted through messages while Dr. Park Sun-Mi examined the newly installed emergency exits. Professor, Hae-Newell said, looking up from her tablet, you might find this interesting. Several students who fled your class have requested private tutorials. They sent their requests anonymously through their medical drones. Jai-Ho smiled as he read through the messages. They're curious, despite their fear. That's a good sign. Look at this, Sun-Mi added, showing them her screen. The Galactic Science Council has officially reclassified Earth from dangerous anomaly to critical research priority. They want to understand how our planet produced such diverse life forms. A soft chime announced the arrival of a message. It was a video from a group of students gathered in the Institute's common area. The recording showed various species huddled around a data screen, watching Earth nature documentaries. Their medical drones hovered nearby, dispensing calming mist at regular intervals. They're studying Earth's creatures on their own time, Hae-Newell observed, though they still need emotional support to handle it. Jai-Ho nodded with satisfaction. They're learning that the universe is more diverse than they imagined. Sometimes a little shock is the best teacher. The office door chimed, and a small delegation of students entered. They represented different species. One was made of flowing crystal, another was a shifting cloud of gas, and the third was a being of pure energy. All wore enhanced safety shields. Professor Lee, the crystalline student, began, its voice trembling slightly. We have a request. We formed a study group about Earth's marine biology. Would you consider giving us extra lectures? Of course, Jai-Ho replied warmly. What would you like to learn about first? The gaseous student swirled nervously. We're particularly interested in the creatures you mentioned, but didn't show us. The immortal jellyfish and the genetic editing octopus, though perhaps with less dramatic presentations. And maybe with additional medical drones present, the energy being added quickly. Sun-Mi tried to hide her smile as she checked the classroom's new safety features. The Institute had installed emergency phase shift corridors, molecular stabilization fields, and dedicated recovery zones. The medical bay had also created a new rapid response team specifically for Earth biology lectures. Professor, Hae-Newell said, checking her schedule. Should I book the reinforced lecture hall for these extra sessions? The one with the enhanced structural integrity and triple-layered containment fields? Yes, please. Jeho turned back to the students. We'll start with something simple. Perhaps the peacock mantis shrimp, which can punch with the force of a gunshot and see 12 different color bases instead of our mere 3. The gaseous student began to leak stress pheromones, but quickly composed itself. The crystalline student vibrated at a frequency that suggested both fear and fascination, the energy being flickered rapidly but remained present. You see, Jeho said to Hae-Newell and Sunmai after the students left. They're adapting. Soon they'll understand that what they considered impossible is merely the beginning of what nature can achieve. True, Sunmai agreed, though perhaps we should wait a while before telling them about the tardigrade, or the immortal jellyfish, or the fish that walks on land, or one horror at a time. Hae-Newell interrupted with a laugh. Let's not break the galaxy all at once. Jeho smiled as he prepared his notes for the next lecture. The galaxy was finally beginning to understand that Earth's primitive life forms were anything but simple, and if a few students needed therapy after learning about box jellyfish or bobbit worms, well, that was just part of the educational process.